Here, back with our usual weekly broadcast, and I'm joined by my friend Florin. And
Hello.
this week, I thought we would start by recapping what happened at the WWDC last week. And to be honest, I wasn't actually as impressed because most of the things talked about were software related, OS 10 and iOS 9. And even then, as I previously I mentioned, and it turned out to be that way, where not a lot of features were announced, but it was more of a stability fix. So in terms of OS 10, they have the new version coming out called El Capitan. And an iOS on the iOS front, they had iOS and 9 come out with a couple of new apps, like the News app, the small features here and there. Really, not a
They
whole lot.
rarely seem to have the wow factor anymore, for these kind of events. I mean, if they get before, it used to be that both the main two events, the fall and summer one for Apple, were pretty interesting. But nowadays, it seems that we're lucky if we get one good one per year.
Right, and I think the reason for that this time was it seemed like they were working heavily on the Apple Music thing, right? Um, they actually, even though they left that for the end, they Tim Cook pulled the one more thing that he does at the end. I know, of course, Steve Jobs used to do that, but and it seemed like a really extensive amount of effort was put into this Apple Music thing. They wanted to make something really big, so I guess that's why there was not a lot of anything else in the show.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been done. When Steve Jobs pulled out the iPod Nano, that was super fresh. I mean, nobody had done something like that, but Apple Music, it's been done.
It's true, and it was not certainly not a device announcement, right? They didn't have a device. They announced the HomeKit and all, but I think that will be left for the upcoming event, which should happen in August. I guess where they will announce the new iPhones. But you are right. There hasn't been like those Steve Jobs moments that we used to have before. I mean, we had the Apple Watch, but even that was just not as grand. I'm sure Steve Jobs would have done a better job of announcing that thing than Tim Cook did.
Yeah, that's true. So, getting past the Apple disappointment of the past week, and speaking of devices, I have here one pretty freaky little device called Google Cardboard.
Wow, look at that.
So yeah, it's interesting because this is a new philosophy for Google, and I was reading about it in an interview with Sundar Pichai. He's saying that nowadays Google wants to get their products in as many people's hands as possible. So things which before would have been just experiments and would have never left the drawing board are now being released to the public, and it's quite interesting what they're coming up with.
They're basically like the new Microsoft, right?
Yeah, they really are, and Android is the new Windows. And but speaking of that, one of the things that irritates me is that they don't release a lot of their stuff on Windows or Windows Phone platforms. And I understand that Windows Phone is not a popular thing, but Windows is a popular platform. It has an app store, and it seems that the war that they're having with Microsoft is specifically along these lines, that they refuse Microsoft ecosystem app stores and everything full access to their products. I mean, for example, YouTube, right? They have no proper YouTube app. They have no app really at all in any of Microsoft things except for Google Search. And in the case of YouTube, Microsoft themselves made a good app for YouTube, and they released it just for a little while, and Google issued a takedown notice saying that it didn't comply with some of the ways that they allowed people to access YouTube. I think it was something related to how the ads were being shown, but it's just ridiculous. They didn't give Microsoft a chance to put something good out, and they just said no. And this is a big differentiator, because nowadays, if you want to use Windows solutions, you're restricting yourself access to some of the biggest apps in the world, like YouTube and Gmail and all that.
Right. So I have to dissect that a little bit, right? You said that the Windows platform is big, but I really don't see how the Windows mobile platform is big. The Windows phone platform, uh, okay, I need to see statistics because first of all, I've never barely ever seen people carrying Windows phones, and and I live in the Silicon Valley, and I've only seen two people, and one of them just switched to the iPhone.
That's true, but I'm including in this the Windows PC ecosystem because nowadays they're all converging anyway. So I figure that it should be taken into consideration because if somebody has Windows 8 or Windows 10 beta, then they have an app platform. So in that app platform, app store, you should have access to Google services without using a browser.
Right. I completely agree with that, and it's kind of crappy of them to tell Microsoft, hey, take it down, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, you know, Google actually they released everything for the iPhone, so I'm surprised why they treat Microsoft like that.
Yeah, they're saying their specific line is that we don't release apps for low market share ecosystems, and they're thinking of Windows Phone. And they say that Windows PCs can just use the browser for everything. But the reason that, I mean, one of the big reasons that Windows Phone has low market share is that you can't have proper access to all these Google apps, which in some cases, like YouTube, are complete market leaders, and denying them access is denying a big reason for people to buy into this platform.
That almost sounds like a potential lawsuit to me. How can I mean, the whole market share thing, like that's what Microsoft tried to do with Internet Explorer, right? It had inherently tied the browser closer to the operating system, and thus preventing some low-level API access to other browsers, and they got into trouble for that. So
Well, nowadays Google is being sued as well by the European Union for similar issues. I mean, this is something that I've been meaning to talk about: ecosystem lock-in. Nowadays, you have Microsoft, Apple, and Google, and they're all trying to, and Amazon to a certain extent, they're all trying to get people to use their ecosystem and making it exceedingly difficult to switch if you buy something else. I mean, for example, right, if you have invested quite a bit in apps, there is no way that you can transfer those apps from the Google App Store to the iOS App Store, and you just end up paying for everything two times or three times over.
yeah, and I mean that's how they make business, right? If they decided, okay, hey, we're all going to be compatible, obviously they're not going to do that because that might chew up on one or the other's profits.
And it's interesting that nowadays Microsoft is trying to not do this. I noticed that with their new leadership, they've been improving their offerings on all the platforms quite a lot. But unfortunately for them, this is taking people away from their own platform. I mean, if you have an excellent Outlook.com email experience or OneDrive experience on iOS and Android, why bother with Windows?
Right, I completely agree, but maybe Microsoft is looking past that, right? I guess they want people to use their platform, which is like things like Outlook. They're all web based, right? So I guess if they decide to release an app for the iOS or the Mac, they still consider that as customer retention of some form.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how much money they're actually making off this because, in the case of Outlook.com, for example, I don't have ads in their email client. I mean, there are no ads in their email client. It's free. So, I mean, how are they making money from me using Outlook.com through the Outlook.com app on Android?
Yeah, I've always wondered that too, but I guess they're probably looking at it long term, and for them, as long as they have excuse me, as long as they have captured the users, maybe they can do something with the users later on in the future. It's a form of an investment, perhaps.
Yeah, they still have so much money that they can just throw a whole bunch of money at a problem and hope that in the future this will capitalize. But it's a risky proposition because users, you never know what they're going to do. I mean, they might just ignore your platform because it's not seen as cool enough anymore. And speaking of that, with Google Cardboard, for example, it's an example of just a tiny thing, but which involves a lot of mind share. I mean, you want you want to try it. It's a very low investment. It's like $10 to try it out, and then you just use the apps that exist on Android and nowadays on iOS also, and you get more invested in the Google way of doing things. You get more interested in Google, and it becomes more important to your lifestyle, and becomes more difficult to change to something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an issue, and for the users, they have to really keep in mind, who they want to be more vested with, right? And these three big companies, they are fighting it on different fronts. Like Apple has now taken the stance of how they deal better with privacy, and everyone should use their platform because they're better with privacy. Whereas Google's strategy is saying, hey, ours is cheaper, it's more open, it's more accessible, and we are releasing all these cool new apps for you to try.
Yeah, well, I think Apple's whole privacy thing, I mean, in the sense that Apple is not snooping on you, has taken quite a hit after the celebrity photo scandal, because it just shows that they haven't taken security seriously enough, so that just someone off the street could do that.
It is true, and even so, I was having this discussion with a colleague of mine, right, about Apple claims to be very privacy oriented, and everything that most of the features that they have on on the phone are done locally. It's not sent to the cloud like it is for Google. But on the other hand, Apple has all these apps that access the web all the time, and they claim it's anonymous, and they claim like they don't use it. But all these are claims. That how do you verify such claims?
Yeah, and they can always go wrong. I mean, it's a type of. I don't feel that in terms of their web apps, Apple has good enough engineers compared to Google, for example. I feel that. As was shown, actually, if someone is motivated enough to mess around, then it shows that they're a bit behind the curve on these things.
That's very true, and not only the web portion, right? Even on the phone itself, the hardware and the iOS itself. Every day there are new hacks coming out, new exploits coming out about how you can gain access without entering the passcode and things like that. So I feel like they haven't done enough on security as a whole, and they need to really put more effort on that.
Yeah, speaking of ways to access your devices, I've been checking out on Windows 10. They haven't yet released into the beta builds that are available to the insiders, but Windows 10 will feature a new product called Windows Hello, which apparently uses some interesting 3D webcam technology from Intel to sort of scan your face and your iris so that you don't need a password anymore. And this seems to be a much more secure system than what has been, well, for example, compared to the face login on Android. And it'll be interesting to see what solutions come up with using this technology.
How is it different from how it works on Android?
It's a much more sophisticated webcam sensor, so that it's much more difficult to fool. Because, for example, Android famously had the problem that if you had face login using the camera, you could put a picture in front of it and it would recognize it as yourself. But apparently Windows Hello uses it's called RealSense, I think. RealSense 3.
New hardware.
Yeah, new hardware. It won't work on existing laptops. It's supposed to be a differentiator on the new laptops that'll come out this year as launch laptops and launch tablets for Windows 10, and yeah, it seems it'll be much more effective at knowing that it's you.
Interesting, and we really need to do away with passwords in general, right? It's been shown to be really problematic. People forget them, they get hacked, just a whole myriad of issues. So we certainly, and I think fingerprint login works pretty well, but that's still not as this sounds much more intuitive than a fingerprint. It sounds much more effortless.
Yeah, and in the same field, one of the things that Google announced at their latest conference was this interesting system, whereas they will know who you are based on your app usage. So they're saying that even if you introduce the correct password, they'll be able to figure out the fact that since the person doesn't access the computer or the phone the way you normally would, the way you normally have for this past time, then they'll know it's not you. You know?
Man, that's crazy. That's Google adding even more to the treasure trove of fingerprinting you as a person with all these other metrics you have. Now that's quite scary. They know who
Yeah,
you
it
are by
is.
search, by your app usage patterns, by your email patterns. They even know how by how you type. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, in fact, one of the new things in Android M will be the fact that I mean they actually came out and said this, that right now when you use Android, when you're in an app, you are invisible to Google. They don't know what you're doing in that app, and they want to change that obviously because they don't want to leave all this information to go unrecorded. So in Android M, the newer version, they will be able to record what you're doing in that app, and they will use this for giving you some specific new information, like the way Google Now works on a system-wide level. They will have Google Now for apps, so that let's say you're in a, I don't know, you're in a transportation app, and you look up some specific train, then if you press on the Google Now button, or if you go up on the screen, the way it works is that they'll give you some related information to what you're looking for.
Huh. How can they get away with that, especially now that Apple is hitting them on the privacy front? They'll have to make changes. I'm sure the next I/O next year will be so privacy focused. They'll try and come out and assure everyone they're not snooping on their data, right?
Yeah,
Um,
they'll assure everyone that it's a feature. It's for your own good.
anyway, speaking of which, how is the cardboard? Have you used it?
Yeah, I've used it a bit. I feel that the apps that other people have made for it are very immature. They're quite, I mean, they're indie apps, obviously, and I haven't yet gotten around to checking out all of them because there aren't many anyway. I mean, there are just a few dozen, I think, total, and it's not bad, but I feel that a more polished experience would really help in getting more people to use it, because right now, except for the Google demos with things like Google Earth, which are quite interesting, whereas you navigate the Earth in full 3D and you move your head and it moves around like that. I've tried a couple of games also, and if it reminds me a bit of Windows Connect, Microsoft Connect on the Xbox, in the sense that the potential is there, but it's still quite buggy. And I'd like to see someone with more know-how get into this.
So what I'm really curious about is it actually immersive? Because I've never used anything like this before, but every time I see someone getting into an Oculus Rift setup, they always come out seemingly being really impressed with how immersive it was. And I've heard the similar things about Google. So is it really actually immersive? Do you, let's say if you're using it for 10 minutes, would you actually get lost or feel disoriented when you remove the cardboard?
Actually, the whole thing about getting lost or dizzy feeling is not a good thing. I mean, they're trying to avoid that. And I would say I didn't feel dizzy personally. And
No,
it's quite a,
when I say lost, I actually mean, is it immersive? Are you lost into the VR thing that's running? Do you feel like
what
you were there? Do you forget you're in real life, for example?
Well, what I've seen so far is visually immersive. I mean, what you see with your eyes, it covers the whole field of view. So that's yes, that's immersive. However, there's the rest of your body to consider. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the problem so far that would keep me from being totally immersed, because and actually, I understand that Steam have been working in this sense with some much better stuff, because right now when I use Google Cardboard, obviously my hands don't do anything, my feet don't do anything, and that doesn't help with the immersion. But it is pretty cool if you're looking for some certain experiences. I feel that Google Earth was the best experience, and it still was kind of pixelated because you actually need a whole lot of horsepower for this kind of thing, and obviously a Nexus 5 is much less powerful than Oculus VR kit. But I feel that if they can do something with the rest of the body, then it'll become much better. And I've been reading actually about this prototype headset that Steam and HTC of all people have created, which is quite interesting because it has much better monitoring of your body. And in that sense, they have sort of a camera system, and it tracks what you do outside of the headset, and you can walk around a bit in a small area, but nevertheless you can walk around, and you can use your hands. And there's also this product made by Sony, I think it's called Morpheus, which uses the PlayStation Move controller, so that also helps. But still, you're holding on to something. I mean, it's not as good as not using anything.
Right. So for those of us who are interested in getting it, how did you get it? Is there, how much is it? Any information for those of us who want to try it?
It was really cheap. It was $10, and realistically, I mean, first of all, you can build it yourself using the instructions. You just have to order a couple of things which are very cheap. But probably the best way to go would be buying a ready-made kit like I did, and those seem to be in the area of about $10. And it's I would say it's worth it because it's an interesting experience. It's something that you don't get with any other hardware at the moment without paying a few $100s. So for a small amount of money, you can really try out something new.
And did you say they have apps on the iOS for it too?
Yes, I believe so. In the Google I/O conference just now, they announced a new version of the platform, in which I believe they also I'm not 100% sure if it's already launched, but they said that they've come out with it for iOS. Yes.
Oh, interesting. Yes, I'd certainly like to try it. I saw some third-party made Google Cardboard devices being sold before, but I think this was before the time when there were many iOS apps for it. So, even for those of us with iOS, I think it'll be nice to have a taste of what this is all about. And
ideally, to help with the immersion, you should get one. I got one which has sort of like a headband, and that helps you because you don't have to hold on to it at all times.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, and speaking of which, we just saw Oculus Rift just had a press release, right, about one of their more recent. I think it was the announcement for the final one that they will start retailing, which is early next year, I believe.
Yeah, people have been waiting for this for quite a while.
Yeah, and so I would like to get my hands on one. And speaking of that, Microsoft partnered with them. So apparently, every Oculus Rift will now come with a Microsoft Xbox One controller.
Yeah, I saw.
I think that's pretty cool on Microsoft's part. However, Oculus actually has their own controllers, right, which actually fit the hand. They're these funky-looking controllers, but apparently, it's going to help with the immersion if you use their controllers. However, it doesn't come with. You have to spend a couple of $100s more to get the controllers, which I think is a shame. If I get into this, I would like to have the whole immersion, the whole deal, right, instead of just having one portion of it.
Yeah, it seems like it's a whole new battlefield for several developers, to try to make this VR experience count. But I think more important than the hardware itself will be the kind of developers they'll be able to attract, because I know a lot of people that play exclusively indie games, and that's fine. I mean, they have their own attractions for sure, but I would like to see some major developer support for these things. I mean, it's one thing to play something like an indie game; it's another thing to play GTA using this thing. So
I agree, and I'm sure they'll come up with APIs and SDKs and tools that will allow development for virtual reality games much easier. But these are some of the teething issues, right? Over time, we will have more support for it, and as the whole VR field gets more advanced, I'm sure we'll finally do away with console gaming and maybe even PC gaming, hopefully, as long as as I would, as long as the controls are as good as keyboard and mouse. That's just one of the reasons I've stuck to the PC. But certainly, it looks like the future for sure, but for now, I believe it's still a lot of investment you have to make, especially if you decide you want to go full immersion. You got to get the headset, the controllers, and also one of those. Have you seen one of those crazy treadmills that you need? What do they call them? multi-directional treadmills. There's some phrase for it where basically you're stuck on this treadmill and you can walk and run in any direction.
Well, that would be extremely interesting. I haven't seen those. I gotta check that out. But yeah, that would seem to fix one of the major immersion issues with VR. If you can walk, then
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
it's the station, and it's like like a circular station you stand on, and there's this thing on your waist that holds you in position while you have the VR headset on, and basically this thing allows you to walk or run in any direction. I'm not sure if it allows you to crouch, but we'll get there.
That's pretty crazy. That's something I would love to use to play Fallout.
Yeah, I would love to play GTA with that, right?
Yeah, that too, for sure.
Yeah. And
And speaking of this area, have you seen some information about Microsoft HoloLens?
I have, and it's really exciting, especially since I'm sure you saw the announcement they made. They had a small demo of, well, it was not small; it was a pretty crazy demo, and I'm interested to see how that works, especially performance-wise, right? Being able to watch a HD video, and have it follow you anywhere you are, and being HD in that, in that hardware. I'm not sure how they will need some beefy hardware for that.
Unfortunately, they've made a decision which seems to have pissed a lot of people off. They had an initial announcement of HoloLens, which was very exciting, and people tried that version and it was fantastic. And then they came out recently at their conference with the so-called production-ready version, and that was no good in the sense that, I mean, the comparison that some people made was that if before you had a real proper level of immersion, in this case, I mean, they showed this demo of walking on Mars, right? So if in the first version you thought you were on Mars, in the second version it was like watching Mars through some kind of a keyhole, you know? So
Oh no.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure it must be related to the compromises they have to make to be able to hit some cost targets and power targets. But yeah, one of the things actually is that the HoloLens is wireless, and some people are saying that since it requires some really beefy specs, why not just make it tethered to something?
Well, but tether is not it's not fun, right? You don't want to walk around with something on your waist. That's it kind of comes in the way of immersion. If they can make, actually, why can't they do it where it's whereas you have like a PC device or some device doing all the processing and having it send all the video feed wirelessly to the HoloLens? I feel like especially with wireless HDMI and many other wireless video technologies coming along, I'm sure that's possible with the HoloLens.
Yeah, that could work. That could work. But with the current version, they haven't done anything like that, and it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. It'll probably be something like the Microsoft Band, whereas you have a lot of interesting technologies, but it'll still have some issues in the initial version, and probably need to wait for the next one.
That is right. I agree. But what I appreciate about the HoloLens is Microsoft didn't just decide, hey, let's create another VR device, right? They went they went on a tangent and decided to make this augmented reality device where everything is augmented into the real world, as opposed to the VR, which recreates your world for you. So I appreciate that they did that, and I think they did a good job. Hopefully they do a better job in executing the idea than they seem to be doing.
Yeah, I feel that some very smart designers work for Microsoft, because actually some very smart engineers, because once they put their minds to something, for example, the Surface, right? The Surface is a very nice product, which was, I think, the first real combination of tablet and PC, which was very functional in both these ways.
Yes, but still, I still think what the problem with that platform was, I mean, adoption wise, I'm not sure how much adoption it got, especially with the it had to compete with the iPad, right? And they really need to figure out the software, right? And I think they are kind of doing that with Windows 10. Whereas then, if they're going to make a software for a tablet, it should be dedicated to the tablet, and for the PC should be dedicated to the PC. They tried to make this one software work for everything, and I believe that came in the way for them.
Well, that's true, but they are improving on that. And as opposed to other products of theirs, I've seen a lot of surfaces in the wild, like in airports and other places. I've seen people use this. So I hear that it's selling quite well. I mean, especially since version 3 or so, it's been selling very well for them. So I feel that they'll be making something quite interesting. And actually, that they actually try to stop themselves. To creating something too competitive, because if they would have come up with something that was a lot cheaper than the price it is right now, they would have probably competed directly with their partners. And I feel that Microsoft still has this thing, whereas they don't want to piss off their partners by competing directly with them.
Yeah, that's very true about Microsoft, and they have to do that, right? Because they still are consider themselves to be a software company predominantly, and they want their software to be, as pervasive as possible. So would you say that if someone wanted to look at buying, a Windows laptop today, would they rather just go for the Surface?
Well, the value proposition is very important, because some people simply don't want to spend at least $800 on a laptop. And actually, it's not even 800; it's 920, because 800 doesn't give you the keyboard, which, by the way, is 120 bucks. I think ridiculously overpriced for a Snap-on keyboard. But anyway, so yeah, I think if your budget starts at least $800, then it should be the one to get. But for most people that want to get a Windows laptop, their budget, I think, starts more in the region of maybe $500. I mean,
Right, or some case even lower. And actually, I've noticed that the Chromebooks are getting more and more popular too. At one point on Amazon, I think the Chromebook was the top-selling laptop.
or you could just get a laptop and install Chrome on it and have a lot more
So,
functionality.
no, I agree, but I think with the Chromebooks they have a deeper level of integration with the hardware, whereas they have some security checks and things like that. Whereas
Well,
on if you install it on a regular PC or a notebook, I think you miss out on some of the hardware features like quick, a faster wake up and from sleep and things like that.
yeah, that's true. But well, okay, compared with if you have a laptop with an SSD, I mean, for example, HP has some Stream laptops, which are very cheap, run Windows, and I mean, they're fast enough in the sense of waking up for sleep and all that. I think the main concern is malware. I mean, with Chromebooks, you don't have to worry about that, because they haven't really built a lot of viruses for them. So I think if you want to give something to your grandma or whatnot, then it's a good
No, but
option for
the
them.
thing is, Chromebooks are also designed to be cheap, right? There are you have some really cheap, entry level Chromebooks, and they're trying to compete with just regular laptops that are being cheaper.
Yeah, but I have yet to see a Chromebook that is cheaper than a laptop. I mean, you can buy the same specs in a regular PC,
I
or
suppose.
better. I mean, ARM Chromebooks are significantly slower than, let's say, an Intel Celeron processor, and they're similarly priced. I mean, you can get like I haven't seen Chromebooks for like $150, whereas if you buy a Chromebook for $300, you can get a laptop for $300. So, it's
True, right, and actually that is one of the things Chromebook don't have for them, right? It's performance. They've been known to be a little slower compared to other regular laptops.
No, I think the killer proposition would be if either Chrome OS becomes completely replaced by Android, or if they have this system, whereas they're allowing some Android apps to be ported to Chrome OS. That I think is the main thing. If you get decent apps from Android, then you can have a better value proposition. Right now, if you want to do a lot of things like play MKV video or something, Chrome OS is a terrible option.
Right. Yeah, they haven't really optimized for HD or even gaming. I'm not sure how it does as far as gaming goes, but it seems to be a fairly low usage laptop for people who just want to browse or
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
just
For
browse.
internet usage, it's fine, but that's another thing. No internet means that it's not a very useful laptop at all, and you will be in situations where you don't have internet.
It's true, but this whole argument about requiring the internet to do things, right? I mean, I really hope in not too long we reach this this state where the internet is really everywhere at all times, just like electricity is, right? I mean, we don't complain about things like, oh, hey, this requires an electricity, you're dependent on it. What if the electricity goes off? We don't talk about that. I want the internet to be at that level, and I think it just should come sooner.
It's getting there. It's getting there. I think we're pretty much run out of time here. So I guess we'll have to continue some of these topics, which are quite. I mean, every week we get some new information about these things in the VR field and in the mobile field as well. So I'll see you next time.
Adios.